Detroit is different here. Just lead. We're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, New Detroit. This vision is alive today. And I'm definitely here with somebody that I've known for a minute. We sat in different boardrooms together, seeing how he worked. And then I was also seeing him work the room when we talking about equity in business and why that's important. So, Dwan, as you're here, equity in business. Why does it make sense? Why should a business be focused on that, especially being a person that knows finance? Financially, how will being equitable, being diverse, being inclusive, how will that help my bottom line?
So are you speaking from the perspective of a large business looking to provide equity, or are you thinking of it from a business owner that's out here trying to make it and need everybody else to understand equity?
Okay, let's go both levels. So first, let's go to the small business. I'm a small business. I own a flower shop.
Gotcha.
What should my focus be?
So I don't want to pretend to be an expert to all things, but like if you're talking about equity, that's something that like I'm passionate about, and I kind of like my mind can't escape thinking about that space. And I struggle with the fact that it's kind of become a buzzword. So like we have so many people that use it and throw it around, and we don't necessarily have a unified definition on what it even is, the term equity. But I think about one of the things that the space that I sit in, which is funding black entrepreneurs in the city of Detroit. I think that we, coming out the heels of the pandemic, I hope, right? Like most of us hope. We've seen so many small businesses struggle, and we've seen like different parts of the community corral around to create funding, access to funding, and what have you. And it's just like what we saw physically and the ramifications of the pandemic, as we saw, the black community and more impoverished communities end up being more susceptible and to get sick because we have all these pre-existing conditions, right, that you can trace to circumstances, situations, and ultimately like white supremacy, racism, and all these other like monsters, the boogeymen, right? But the businesses had some of those same pre-existing conditions. So the pandemic hit our community harder because as we don't have the same access to health care, right? If you're talking about like just having insurance or the way that we're treated when we do go to hospitals, and the racism that's like obviously there, and it's been well documented and studied, like that exists in the space where it's access to capital, right? So like the pre-existing conditions there is that we have had limited access historically, currently, right? So where some businesses were able to weather the storm until some of the assistance came, a lot of black entrepreneurs weren't in position to, right? Because they don't have the same relationships with bankers. They don't have like a big, 6 months of ability to float themselves during the lockdown and what have you. So I was just on a conversation in another room where we were talking about the desire to not need organizations like Black Leaders Detroit, which is the organization that I've founded and I get the privilege to be a CEO of. In order to hope that will be happening, we would need to hope that the system self-corrects itself, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that any of us can afford to hold our breath and wait for that to happen. We can all work towards that, but I think that there's going to consistently be a need to have these discussions, but also have organizations step up to fill in the gaps and the void, right? So equity, and equity is not one-sided. The benefit is not one-sided. The sacrifice is not one-sided, right? So if we have more small businesses, black and brown business owners succeed, they buy their products from somewhere, right? Like they buy the equipment from somewhere, right? So one of the things that we've never had to do, we've never had to convince small business owners, especially black and brown business owners, to hire from within the community. We never had to put some type of requirement on them to do that. They're going to organically and naturally do that because they care and they come from those communities.
Okay, now I gotta flip it on its side. You asked who am I talking to? We addressed a small business, a large business, large corporations. How should they look at this? How does diversity, equity, and inclusion empower them when they're conducting business?
I mean, I think that the studies show what we already know, right? Like if you're going to have the same profile, the same like person, like or people group there in the room, you're going to have limited perspectives. So there's going to be blind spots that you have naturally, right? Like I don't want to work with a bunch of people that think and see the world the same way that I do, and have the same lived experiences that I have, right? Because if that's the case, like we're not going to be able to cover or see like something from a bunch of different angles. So what the records show and data shows is that businesses that are intentional about equity, diversity, inclusion, they end up doing better. And I think that sometimes big corporations here, people within some of these big organizations here, you're trying to replace me, right, with somebody that is just black or just brown or just a woman or just, identifies as LGBTQ, right? But no, like we're trying to bring people in with talent. So we're not trying to check a box and just bring somebody in that represents a certain people group. What we're advocating for is like there are people out here with talent, equally qualified, but just aren't afforded the same opportunity. One of the things that I like to point out is that sometimes it's a pipeline issue, right? Because of proximity, a lot of times people hire people that they know or recommend people that they know. So I think that, we can definitely point to structural, systemic racism issues, but as we have different leadership in some of these spaces that actually want to get it right, the desire doesn't equal ability and know-how. So I think that, sometimes we may be like limited in our understanding, so we're putting everything in this category of like, it's a racist company. When they might have somebody there that wants to get it right, but they just don't have the friend group or the network to actually bring in people with different perspectives. So I think that practically we have to figure out like how to get that part right.
So almost like an Angie's List of of how diversity, equity, and inclusion would be, and helping navigate that. And that's what I see this conference and events like this and New Detroit partnering, empowering organizations to pull out of this. So you can build more of a network and you can empower yourself, enlighten yourself with more so you can engage.
Yeah, it's like Marlo Stoudemire, blessings to him and his family. He was trying to solve that problem, right? When he was doing, was it Roster Detroit? And what he was doing was he was trying to like basically put that Angie's List together of talented black Detroiters that were out here like killing it, and just putting them on display so that people could see, hey, like we do have talent, right? Like we have talent right here, right? I think that one of the things that I've coached some businesses that you would know the name of these companies if I shared their name. Yeah. They were trying to figure out how to become more diverse and more equitable. And one of the things I share with them is that when we have options, we're coming into an interview, but we're also interviewing you. And we do research and we check your references. We talk to black folks that work for your company. And if they say, look, like they're not ready, you know what I mean? We take that into consideration. So like I say that to say, I understand that it's not as easy for some companies to actually be more diverse when they have a desire to.
That's powerful. Thank you so much.